The AI monsters will have us all. We'll be plugged in. We'll be just like
The Matrix.
Wall-E Matrix. Yes, insert analogy here. Go ahead.
I see a lot of businesses right now, and this is kind of a knee-jerk reaction I don't know why people do this, but they do this. They cut marketing and they cut advertising.
Oh, did
And
you hear
it
my
dr-
audible groan?
and it drives me crazy, absolutely crazy, is because if you think of advertising and marketing fund resources that you have allocated towards it as a slush fund that you can just cut it off because that's the easiest way to do,
Mhm.
let's just cut off our marketing.
That was Kathy Svetina, who is a fractional CFO, podcast host of Help My Business is Growing, and she helps us break down financial statements into plain language that we can easily understand, tell us what we need to pay attention to, and how to stay out of trouble financially. Do more by doing less. With me, Charles Alexander, for small business owners, startups, and busy folks. Steve Jobs should fix that. He should have, what are they, earbuds? I keep saying it wrong and my kids make fun of me. Earbuds for super tiny ears. So look, you're a fractional CFO. I know what accountants are, and I know what bookkeepers are. I've worked with small business owners forever. Dude, I'm not smart enough to know. Tell me what a fractional CFO is.
So I will tell you first, I'll tell you what the bookkeepers and accountants do. So the bookkeepers really make sure that your books are done correctly, they categorize everything to make sure your bills
Right.
are paid, all that good stuff. Accountants in the small business space usually take care of the taxes portion. But what you'll notice here is a lot of these people just deal with the
Hmm.
past of the business, what happened in the business. They record it. How about the future of the business? Who takes care of that? Usually it's just the business owner. The problem
Right.
with that is that they struggle a lot because to figure out the future of the business, you have to understand the past and marry those two together. That's what fractional CFOs do. We take care of the future of the business, the financial future of the business.
So that's different than when I work with small business owners. We get into this a little bit. Obviously, I'm not a CPA fractional CFO. We always go over the cash flow, the P&L, balance sheet if they have one, which is almost never. And we're
Mhm.
crunching numbers to figure out kind of what happened in the past. How are you figuring out, and how does a small business owner now figure out, how do I project that? What does that look like into the future?
So a lot of times they don't have those projections. When it
Gotcha.
comes to budget forecast, it's no one's really doing that for them. And that's a problem because if you're just making decisions based on right now, you become very reactive. And with very reactive, you can make some decisions that are just not going to serve you well. So that's why it's important to really take a look at where am I going to be in the future and make those projections. The issue with that is that it takes a lot of time to do it. That's number
Hmm.
one. And you have to have the expertise. And when you're thinking about the future of the business, yeah, the fractional CFOs looks at the numbers that the business has in the past to figure out where we can go and what are the potentials, but also marrying the operation side of the business, marrying if you have salespeople, if you have marketing people,
Hmm.
having those types of conversations. Because I always say finance does not live in a vacuum. We are very much should be embedded in the business because
Right.
every single thing that happens in the business, the way how you're hiring people, the way how you're doing your marketing, like every single thing that you do essentially will eventually end up in your numbers. So being proactive about it and thinking about what are the decisions that I'm making right now, how are those going to affect the finances?
So if I'm sitting here and I've got a borderline decent P&L, it sometimes matches my tax returns. And I've been open for a few years. What are some of the things I should be looking at before I go out and hire anybody? What's some things I need to be doing and I can do maybe on my own or a little bit to get started to forecast what I want to do into the future or to forecast what I think will happen?
It really depends on what type of industry you're in and
Okay.
what are your goals. So I will give you an example that I work with businesses that are between a million and 10 already.
Oh,
I do not work with smaller businesses. If you are in the smaller business space, if you're under a million, there's a lot of things that you can still do on your own. For example, you can do a budget. I would do an annual planning every single year. Usually you would want to do it in the fall so that you're preparing for the next year. That's number
gotcha.
one. The other thing that you can do is there's a lot of software out there that you can use that will help you with this budgeting and forecasting. One of them that I like to recommend, and this is not sponsored in any way, it's called Fathom.
How do you spell
Fathom,
that? Fat.
Fathom. I think that's
Okay.
how it's spelled. Fathom. They have the basics of forecasting and budgeting. However, be very aware that the way how you're setting up the system, it's going to impact the forecast. So you might want to take a look at, have your bookkeeper and accountant take a look at this so
Hmm.
that you set it up the right way.
Okay.
Because if you don't set it up the right way, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
But that's going to help you figure out, how do I do this on my own? And then the other things that you can do is just be really proactive about the decisions that you're making. Really think about it holistically. The stuff that I'm doing right now, how is it going to affect the business in the future? And I'll give you, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, give me some of those examples because that's, I think, an area where I struggle with coaching other people is that we review their financials and we kind of project into the future. We don't look at it always holistically. What does that mean if you hire a salespeople? What will that do to your operations team? Do you need equipment later? That's me stepping on your toes because you were about to drop a brilliant example on me right there.
I will give you an example that I think it's very relevant right now since we're recording this in 2023. And I see this across the board with a
Oh,
lot of
this doesn't drop
companies.
until 2027.
That's going to be completely outdated.
I
Everything's going
know
to be different.
the AI monsters will have us all. We'll be plugged in. We'll be just like
The Matrix.
Wall-E Matrix. Yes, insert analogy here. Go ahead.
I see a lot of businesses right now, and this is kind of a knee jerk reaction that I don't know why people do this, but they do this. They cut marketing and they cut advertising.
Oh, did
And
you hear
it
my audible groan?
and it drives me crazy, absolutely crazy, is because if you think of advertising and marketing fund resources that you have allocated towards it as a slush fund that you can just cut it off because that's the easiest way to do,
Mhm.
let's just cut off our marketing. You are setting yourself off in the future for less sales, less brand recognition, and that is going to impact the business significantly in the future. So I'm not saying let's just spend money willy-nilly in marketing because and drop everything in
Mhm.
there. But what I'm saying is taking a look at your marketing numbers, whatever you're spending on it right now, and figure out, is it still relevant? Can we optimize the cost that we have? Maybe we can have better deals somewhere. There's other things that you can restructure, but don't just cut it because it's easy to cut
Right.
10% off of marketing.
That's always the first place. It's maddening. It's always the first place everybody goes to cut. It's like saying, well, we got to take a long trip in the car. So what are we going to do? It's going to be expensive. Well, let's cut back on gas.
Exactly.
I'm going to take a quick sidebar here with you and we're going to come back to financials. But in terms of somebody who's in the financial space, you do a killer job at marketing. So anybody that's listening right now that's marketing, insurance, or financial insurance, or anything else, what are a couple of the things that you do to stand out in that field where so many people don't stand out?
Well, thanks, Charles. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I am very focused on the type of client that I serve, and I serve women-owned businesses are between a million and 10. So that is the space that I work in. So I'm always thinking of what is the type of content that I produce that is going to help those businesses. And also, when you're producing content, it's also how you're going to be distributing it. So I have a couple of ways to distribute it. The major one is on LinkedIn. So
Mhm.
that has been my major main source of referrals, of actually where I get business. That's where my ideal clients are. And also that's where people who serve my ideal clients that can refer me to them
Correct.
are living in. So LinkedIn has been basically a gold mine for me.
That's where you created a niche. I know it's supposed to be pronounced niche. I'm here in Tennessee. We say niche, but you've got a tight niche and using LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, or just any event you go to, you know exactly who your type of customer is and what they think, what they feel. And you can be the authority in that space immediately doing that, can't you?
Yeah, and it's the more clear you are on the type of customer you serve, the easier it is to do everything, to produce content because you know what they care about. And the second thing is you know where to find them, you know what conferences to go
Hmm.
to, what they're talking about, and all of that stuff. So it's makes marketing a lot easier and also I will tell you a lot cheaper because you're not throwing spaghetti and money at the wall. You know
Sure.
exactly what to do and where to go and how to do it. You just have to go and do
Well, I target farmers in South Dakota, and I can tell you it's not going well.
it.
Got to broaden that horizon a little bit. So going back to financial, when we're talking, you were talking, giving us some tools there smaller businesses can use for forecasting and projecting, and then they need to think about the business overall or who else that affects. A lot of them, when I talk to them about financial planning, they think of their financial planners. What's the difference between financial planning, or better yet, what does a healthy business look like financially, and how's that different than a personal business or personal finances?
That's a very good question. And I see a lot of people being confused when you talk about financial planners. And I want to make sure financial planners, when we're talking about financial planners, are those are the people that take care of your personal finances. They'll take a look at, your 401ks, how are
Mhm.
you putting your money out, and if you have any trusts, if you have will and all that other stuff that relates to personal finances. People who are doing that for the businesses are called, in the small business space at least, fractional CFOs. When you go into the big businesses, we are just called finance people. You have finance director, financial
Mhm.
an analyst, and all that stuff. But we're talking about the small business space. So the fractional CFOs are the people that are really looking at the future and the financial planning for the business. We do not touch the financial planning for the individuals. However, we do business small businesses go very hand in hand with the finances with the business owner. So sometimes what we do talk to the financial planners of the business owner to figure out what's the best way to do that. But it's definitely not my expertise. If you need a 401k advice, I will not be the person
Yeah.
to do that.
You're not diversifying my mutual fund anytime soon?
No way, not happening. I can give you people who will do that
I
though.
bet you can. You probably know all the people. So, in looking at metrics for a small business, whether it's 0 to 1 million or 1 million to 10, what are some things they should be looking at in their financial statement and their cash flow statement, and God forbid, balance sheet? So, let's start with, let's say, cash flow. What's some things they need to be looking at? What are some issues they're running into there?
That is, I mean, we can talk about for hours about this, but really the big thing is to understand that revenue, profit, and cash are three very different things. Revenue and profit are living on your income statement or your P&L, profit and loss statement. And revenue is essentially, you can equate that to sales. It's how much money, how much are you actually selling? And profit is how much, after all the expenses happen, is end up with before taxes, obviously.
Mhm.
But this is different than cash, and a lot of small businesses get really confused about, well, I'm seeing all this profit on my P&L statement, but
Mhm.
where the heck is the money in the bank
Oh my
account,
gosh, yes.
right? So, and I will give you an example how this is a very simplified example. Let's say that I sold you something for $10,000 today, and I had about 6,000 in expenses, and you had 6,000 expenses. So your profit for this particular month is
Mhm.
4,000, right?
Right.
And you send me an invoice today, but the invoice terms are actually that I don't have to pay you until 30 days later.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to send you the payment 30 days later. So right now in April, you're showing a $4,000 profit, but I don't have to pay you until May. So you're not going to see that cash until May. And that's the difference between the profit and cash, is because when you have that time difference, when you're actually collecting cash, physically
Mhm.
collecting cash, that is going to be a difference between your what you're seeing on a P&L and what you're actually seeing on cash. And this is especially important for businesses that are working with large corporations or enterprises,
Yes, they all
because
have payment terms.
yes, those payment terms can be absolutely horrific. I mean, it could go into like net 90 days, net 120 days
I
I've
was gonna
seen.
say the net 120 is like the new net 90. That's, and I don't know if that's inflation related or what, but I'm seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, net 120 for a small business,
Oh, it's
that's,
ridiculous.
yeah, that can be really painful.
The example you gave, I've got an endless number of stories. I've had people come in to see me and we're talking about their finances, and Charles, we're just struggling. I don't know. Well, send me your P&L. And they send it to me. And I said, well, right here it says year to date, we've got this and we've made this. You've netted this much. So you're in good shape. So, well, it's not in the bank. So I'm not in good shape. And then that's where we start having to try to piece that puzzle together. And even in a lot of those cases, I'm guessing since they're showing me the P&L, it's on an accrual basis. Accrual being, and by the way, accrual is one of the most difficult words on planet Earth to ever say. I want everybody to be on a cash basis just so I can say it. But if they're on an accrual basis showing the money in and out, even before it's in and out, so to speak, what's owed or what is owed to them or owed to somebody else, that's the issue, is it not? Since they're not doing that P&L on a cash basis, they can show that they've got profit, but it not be in the bank.
I will tell you this, that I would advise, if you can, go on an accrual basis as fast as possible. And there's a reason for this. I know, and you will have this problem between, you'll see the P&L saying one thing and the cash saying the other. However, the problem with the cash basis accounting is that the example that I just gave you,
Hmm.
right now, if we are on an accrual basis, I will know that I sent you that invoice and that you need to pay it. The problem with your cash basis is because it does not use accounts receivable, which is meaning that you have sent the invoice out, but you haven't received the cash yet. So that's a record that you're keeping who is owing you money. The problem with the cash basis is that you will not have that record because essentially on the cash basis accounting, until you see that cash coming into your bank account, the transaction does not exist. It's not anywhere in your financial statements. And that's a problem because if you have a lot of cases like this, you have nowhere, unless you have a spreadsheet somewhere off on your Google Drive or whatever it
Right.
is on your computer, you will not know that you have actually sent that invoice out because it's not going to be in your financial statements. And when you're on an accrual basis, you can always go into your aging statement and accounts receivable. You can go slice it, dice it however you want by customer. How long
Hmm.
has it been since you sent them out? When is the due date? If someone is past the due date, you can follow up on it. You can have a whole collection process. When you're on cash basis, you're missing a lot of that very valuable information that you need to run your business well.
So the profit and losses on an accrual basis shows the overall global picture of money in and money out. Cash flow shows just cash in, cash out at that basis. And then the balance sheet, that's our asset. I'm going to butcher this. That's our assets, liabilities, and equity. But explain to us what a balance sheet is or why we need one and why nobody I work with has one.
And this is so sad because balance sheet is a wealth of information about your business from very beginning, from day one that you started. You will see, as you said, and you said this correctly, assets equals liabilities and equity. So the balance sheet, the reason why it's called a balance sheet is because it needs to balance. If it doesn't balance, your balance sheet, something went wrong. Definitely something went wrong. And it needs to balance up to a penny. Definitely needs to balance up to a penny. There's a lot of stuff that you can see on there. If we go down the list, you will see cash. You will see how much it's actually in your bank account right now in the cash. Then accounts receivable is how much your customers are owing you money right now. So these are the invoices that you sent out, but they haven't paid you yet. It's going to become cash hopefully soon.
Hmm.
Then if you have any inventory that you're selling, you're going to find it there. If you have any fixed assets, meaning let's say that you have an equipment, you have tractors, you're owning a building, you own furniture, whatever you might own, you'll see it there too. You will not see it on your profit and loss statement because it's not cost, it's an asset. So it's something that it actually has value that you can resell later on. So that you will see on your balance sheet.
Right.
So that is these are just some of the items that you can see on the assets. And then you have the liabilities and equity. So the best way to think about this is liabilities is what you owe, and equity is after everything that you currently owe
Hmm.
and what you owe, the difference is equity, what you would still be left after if you completely sold the business.
I always try to explain it to people like I start with their house because it's a pretty simple concept. You have a house, it is worth currently in 2023 in Tennessee, it's worth astronomical. Say it's worth $1 million, but you owe $500,000 on it. Well, you asset minus your liability of 500,000 means you're worth, and they can always spot it. Oh, well, I'm worth 500,000. So what happens if you take out a line of credit and you use that money? Well, it's worth whatever less that is.
Yep.
But if you improve it, then it goes up. Then we start trying to tie everything back in together with their business assets and their liabilities. Now, trying to track down some of the liabilities is a little tougher sometimes because people don't always have a great clue of what they owe or where it is, but it's definitely needed.
And that's where good bookkeeping comes in handy
Right.
because you really need a good bookkeeper that's going to record everything and record it on a monthly, well, a weekly basis,
Mhm.
so that every single month you're able to, what we call in finance, close the books, meaning that, right now we're in April, we should be completely confident that all the previous months that happened before April are accurately recorded, they're closed, everything ticks and ties, and that the numbers that we have in there are 100% reliable, and then we can actually make decisions off of it. Because if you don't have that, let's say for example that you missed a bill and now you have to go open these books, now you have numbers that are incomplete, and it's really hard to make decisions and plan for the future when you have incomplete number. What if you missed an invoice for $100,000 to your vendor, and now you, oops,
Mhm.
yeah.
I bet it, Kathy, I bet it drives you crazy if they're off by a dollar in the balance sheet, doesn't it?
You cannot have a balance sheet off by a cent. Even the balance sheet
Because it's
needs to
in
be
balance.
balanced.
Man, I've seen my wife, she's a bookkeeper, and she'll reconcile people's books at the end of the month. And what reconciliation means is that she'll go take a look at their QuickBooks and she'll try to reconcile it to their checking account, for example. And if it's off by a penny, she did like just round it up somewhere, dude. It's a penny. Like, no, it's serious. This is a puzzle. And she goes like full serial, I was gonna say serial killer, but podcast research assistant to figure out where the pieces of the puzzle went off track.
And that's a great bookkeeper. I would definitely hire her.
I call it a sickness, but you're right. It's great for her clients and she'll track it down. So kind of wrapping up the financial piece of the puzzle here, I've heard you talk about like financial frameworks and you've got your own that you kind of get people set up with. What does that look like?
So, bookkeeping and accounting that we've been talking about is basically the foundation of everything. And you talked about the house, and really is the foundation, the basement of the house. If you don't have that done well, everything else just crumbles or just falls apart. And an example that I gave you, if you don't have an invoice that's happened 2 months ago in your books, and all of a sudden you're like, oops, I did not put that in, you cannot really do any planning. It's going to mess up your financial analysis. So that's why I'm so adamant that the businesses that I go into, they need to have a bookkeeper, they need to have an accountant, we need to have that as a basis. I will not work with a business that does not have that because I cannot do my job. I really can't.
Hmm.
So once you have that, then we can build on it. And it really is like a structure of the house. So we can do the financial analysis, which is basically looking at the data that you have and figuring out what are some of the trends, what are some of the issues that we're seeing that maybe we can think about. Can we maybe optimize some of the cost? Where can we do more investments? Where can we put more money in? All that sort of stuff. So that is essentially the walls of the house. And then all of this needs to make sense in the type of systems and the processes that you're using in the business, meaning that the software that you're using, you can actually get the information out really fast. Because if it takes you months to get the most up to date data, that's not going to work out. So, just like in the house, you do not put a bathtub in the middle of the kitchen because it doesn't make sense. You do not want to be using software that doesn't make sense for your business.
The
So
old
if,
bathtub in the kitchen routine.
yeah, not good. Although there's some pictures out there when people do some weird stuff in their house, but it's not
You
good
run,
for resale
you run
value.
out of the budget sometimes. That's just where it goes.
Now that we have the walls and the interior design of the house planned out, now we can figure out how are we going to really plan for the future. That is the financial planning, the strategic planning, the 3 to 5 years plans. Now that we have all this data, we can actually do stuff with it and plan. And then the fifth piece is, which is get forgotten with small businesses. So often I see that. And that's the internal controls. That means that you're safeguarding the assets that you have, meaning that people cannot do any weird stuff and steal from you. Essentially, that's what it is.
Ooh, so the
And a
story.
lot of businesses
Yeah.
do not protect themselves.
You say businesses, it's rampant. It runs through churches, PTOs, every kind of organization where we don't have a check and balance. I mean, I go to a mega church and this past year they had to fire some poor guy, bless his heart. He had stolen up to 6 figures worth of just
Wow.
nonsense from the church. And it was just in all these little nitpicky sort of ways, which sounds crazy at a church that size. They could live through it, but it was nuts. No internal controls.
Yep. Yep. So having the checks and balances, just simple things. It cannot be you don't have to go and do crazy stuff like big companies do, because the bigger the company, the more checks and balances they have to have. But just simple things like make sure that you don't have just one person doing all your bookkeeping, accounting, and everything else. And a lot of businesses, what have this, well, I just don't want to think about it. I have Jane do all of this for me.
Mhm.
The problem is that Jane gets in a little bit of a financial bind. She might start to do some things that are
Right.
not really good.
She'll pay it back later.
Yeah.
I mean, those stilettos won't buy themselves. So, hey, taking a quick switch over into something a little more laid back, and I've been asking everybody this. It's kind of the core of everything I try to do. So, in thinking of this two ways, what's something that you're doing right now that you think you should be doing less of?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have done a lot of delegation and systemizing of the business and everything
Hmm.
else. So I think I'm good there. But I will tell you, and this is funny because just for the last 2 days, I have spent a lot of time on video editing, which is
What
not
do you,
something I should be doing, but
what tool are you
now I'm going to be
using?
doing that. I use the script.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
So I've started training, and she'll see this because she has to edit. I've started training my VA how to do it, and it took a little time because anybody using Descript, it's a fantastic tool. It's not the most intuitive tool out there.
Hmm.
It takes time to figure out. But once I finally got a one page SOP put together and created it, she started figuring it out for me. But man, yeah, you're right. I've been doing that quite a bit myself. I started playing around with what is it? AI video. I don't know. But it takes these longer videos and it'll auto chop them up for you and make 60 to 90-second video clips for you. And it's smart enough to know, take complete thoughts. It'll take that housing thing and put it all into one video and title it for you.
That's really cool.
That's the next tool that you can start overusing, and then you'll have to figure out that you need to be doing less of. So now that we know what you need to be doing less of, what do you want, if once you start doing less of that, what do you want to be doing more of?
We have been trying to focus on doing more educational content in terms of how to really do things with finances. And I actually enjoy that. I enjoy educating people. I enjoy pulling up a spreadsheet and telling them what to look and how to look for. And not just that, how do you actually use that information for the future? So I
Hmm.
do want to start doing more of that. And I have had 2 videos like this and they have gotten really good. I've gotten really good feedback up. So people like it. I want to do more of that.
Well, fantastic. So less video editing, more content creation, so somebody else can do the video editing.
Yes,
Any
definitely.
anybody that you would like to meet that you
That's a good question too. I'm a huge fan of Lego. I don't know if you know that since we know each other,
no, how
but
would I mean, it makes sense.
yeah, and see all the flowers that I have in the background here, they're all Lego
Yeah.
flowers. So yeah, I love Lego. So the person that I would really like to meet is the CEO of Lego,
Will
Niels
Ferrell.
Christensen. Will Ferrell.
Yeah. What's Hans? Okay, yes, that would be. So we'll make that happen. Hans Christensen,
Niels Christensen.
Niels. That makes way more sense because Hans is a completely different person.
Yeah.
So when was he's the CEO?
Yes, of
How long
Lego.
has Lego been around?
I think they've been around since the 50s, probably. They've been around for a long time.
I think it'd be worth a Google. I think you're right. But yes, my son is a Lego fanatic, but maybe you can teach him a few things. Kathy, how can somebody get in touch with you?
Well, it's pretty easy. You can go on my LinkedIn page, Kathy Svetina. I'm the only one there, or you can go on my website, newcastlefinance.us.
All right, folks, you heard it from Kathy herself, fractional CFO. Fantastic. Reach out to her. You will be glad you did. Kathy, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Charles.
All
Really,
right.
really pleasure to be here.
Good deal. Bye. Wait. Don't run off just yet. Do me a big favor. Hit the little plus sign to subscribe. Scroll down wherever you are and leave a very honest 5-star review and tell other people why they should be listening. And if you don't, an angel may in fact lose its wings. True story. Have a great day.